Hey folks, and welcome to my critique of Killer7. Just a friendly reminder that if you haven't completed the game, there will be spoilers in this video. If you wish to avoid them, please pause and go play the game before returning. For everyone else, let's continue. I thought that playing Killer7 on the PC with a mouse and keyboard would make the Heaven Smile less terrifying. That the fear they instilled in me the first time I played through the game was because of how fiddly I found aiming in first person with a controller. I was wrong. The Heaven Smile are scary because of what they represent. The slow, inescapable approach of death. Their laughter is inhuman, and entering a new room and hearing that low chuckle always unnerved me. The cackle they emit when you kill them does not represent a moment of triumph, but is the smile having the last laugh. You've not escaped death, only delayed it. It doesn't matter how many you kill, because if you exit the area and return, they will be back. They always keep respawning. In the first mission, Angel, we are informed that there are only 14 Heaven Smile in the building. Then the duplicator is introduced. They're breeding. I have a theory that the Heaven Smile might be a contagion, a virus that humans can catch, but we only encounter 3 types of Heaven Smile. Those created by Kunlan, the new varieties created by the US government, and the weaker offspring of the duplicator smiles. My theory was based on Andre Almeida turning into a Heaven Smile, but that suggests the government experimenting on citizens to create a weaponized version of the smiles under their control, and not a contagion. I honestly don't know what's worse. I also have a theory that the smiles may be increasing in number as a countermeasure to stop the player from uncovering the past of Amir Parkreiner, but we'll return to this theory a little later. Then there's Iwazaru. We chase him through the basement of Garcian's trailer after transporting there from Battleship Island. Unmasked, we see that our trusted servant and guide throughout the game has been none other than Kunlan. Matsuoka tells us before entering that final room that this is the original and final Heaven Smile. Kun has been keeping tabs on the Smith Syndicate this whole time. Perhaps that's another reason the smiles appear in greater numbers as the game progresses. Not only is Amir remembering who he is, but he's under the control of Harmon Smith, Kunlan's rival. We'll discuss the chess game between Harmon and Kun throughout the video, but what if all this time we thought that Amir was one of Harmon's pieces when he was actually one of Kun's? In the second mission, Sunset, missiles have been fired at Japan from an unknown source, and the US government is deciding whether or not it wants to intervene and save the island nation. There are factions within the US government that think Japan has outlived its usefulness as an ally. They feel the Japanese government is too corrupt and not worth the effort of the US to save. What makes this ironic is we find out later that the Japanese have been controlling the US government for some time through the US elementary school system, and thus the election process. The Japanese have decided the result of the US presidency for decades. It is suggested that the party responsible for the attack on Japan is the UN party, not to be confused with the United Nations. They are responsible for the creation of the Yakumo, a policy that is at the core of Killer7's political conflict. In Sunset, when Christopher Mills relays the orders for Garcian and the Killer7 to kill Fukushima, a restaurant owner that is in possession of the Yakumo, they run into an assassin trying to retrieve the document for the Liberal Party, another Japanese political faction, as well as a third assassin working for the International Ethics Committee. The Killer7 dispatch of both assassins, and the Yakumo falls back into the hands of the UN party under its new leadership of Kanjiro Matsuoka, who is backed by Kunlan. The Yakumo is the UN party's foreign policy for a world under Japanese leadership. As politics can be defined as any idea successful in gaining and maintaining governmental power, the desire for all these factions to gain the Yakumo conveys the absolute power of an idea itself. While it is unclear whether or not the Yakumo has any supernatural significance, it does bestow power on those who possess it. Andre Almeida got his hands on a piece of the Yakumo and was able to grow from a post office clerk into the owner of a mega corporation. True, the corporation is a fraud, a wooden placard that topples when the Killer7 make their way inside it, but perhaps all political ideas are the same. They contain the ability to gain and maintain large amounts of money and power, but are built on a precarious foundation. They only continue to exist and flourish because people believe in them. If the UN party are behind the missile attack launched at Japan, the question then is why? Was it all a ruse to have the US government move on Fukushima through the Killer7 so they can retrieve the Yakumo? It's suggested that similar to how the Yakumo was born out of the ashes of World War II, by destroying Japan with an even greater attack, a new era and the fulfillment of the Yakumo policy can rise like a phoenix from the ashes of the devastated country. Perhaps this is also a modern form of the Bushido Code, the idea of death before dishonor. This idea holds weight thanks to the Heaven Smile. If the UN party were not being controlled by Kunlun, they are after Matsuoka takes his leadership position during Sunset. Kunlun is responsible for the creation of the Heaven Smile, and their main method of attack is that of blowing themselves up by coming into contact with their enemy. Suicide bombing, reminiscent of the kamikaze attacks from the Japanese during World War II, another embodiment of Bushido. The second half of Sunset takes place in the Kaku building, where over a game of Mahjong, representatives of Japan and the US are discussing whether or not Japan will be saved. The talk breaks down when one of the representatives is accused of cheating. The Kaku building is flush with the motifs of gambling. There are puzzles with dice, poker hands, and horse racing. The four-way Mexican standoff and the resulting executions have an inevitability to them that they too were part of the game being played, and this game could not have played out in any other way. A strong theme running through Killer7 is that of politics as a game, of countries and key figures as pieces on a chessboard. This turns literal when Garcian finally enters the forbidden room of his trailer and sees that Harmon Smith and Kunlun are engaged in a game of chess. Garcian and the Killer7 are pieces in that game. This is the core experience of playing Killer7. Killer7 is an action game on rails. The player can only move these characters on predetermined paths, and only certain members of the group can access certain areas. The pieces cannot move freely. One of the reasons Killer7 blew my mind when I first played it is that Harmon Smith and Kunlun are representational characters. They're more than just a single person in a single place at a single time. A young Harmon Smith killing his older counterpart with a Tommy gun is an example of this. The chess game alongside the showdown in the Heaven Smile headquarters and the epilogue in Shanghai show that Harmon and Kun are rivals, but it is a friendly rivalry. It's not as simple as good versus evil. They couldn't be friends if that were the case. It's more yin and yang, two sides of the same coin. I thought perhaps they represented order and chaos, but it would be screwed up if Harmon represented order as the leader of the Killer7, a group of assassins. There's an East versus West dichotomy to their rivalry as well. If the Yakumo is supernatural in origin, then it is likely that Kunlun had a hand in creating it. He created the Heaven Smile, which I think are a weapon for the Japanese in the same way the Yakumo is. Perhaps the Yakumo is a wild card, and the pieces that Harmon and Kun are playing with are as simple as the Killer7 versus the Heaven Smile. The epilogue in Shanghai shows that no matter the state of the world, this idea of competing ideologies between nations has to play out. It's simply a different landscape. Their meeting in Shanghai is 100 years after the only narrative choice the player gets to make, whether or not to kill Matsuoka. This decision results in either the US or Japan winning the current game of politics, a decision that ultimately doesn't seem to matter 100 years later. If the game between Harmon and Kun is as simple as the Killer7 versus the Heaven Smile, what about the mission titled Alter Ego? The Killer7 have a showdown against the Handsome Men, a Sentai task force created by the US government for the purposes of combating the Heaven Smile threat, which at this point has become global. The showdown between the Handsome Men and the Killer7 ends with credits for a 16-bit video game before we see Kunlun. Were the Handsome Men yet another of Kun's chess pieces? An obstacle put in the way of the Killer7 to thwart Harmon winning their game? As long as we're talking about obstacles that are not Heaven Smiles, are Andre Almeida and Curtis Blackburn similar pieces. Garcian Smith's real name is Amir Parkreiner, a trained assassin who as a teenager murdered the Killer7 in a hotel and murdered his school principal Harmon Smith, stuffing him in a safe. The school that Amir was trained at is controlled by the Japanese UN Party, and the missions the Killer7 have been undertaking are for the US government. Amir carries the weapons of the Killer7 in his giant briefcase, meaning that changing into members of the Killer7, Harmon Smith being the leader of the Killer7, and Garcian's subservience to Harmon are all in Amir's head. We discovered this in the final moments of the Smile mission. Opening the safe at Coburn Elementary creates a cut on Amir's forehead, revealing his third eye. He's starting to see again. These memories have been repressed. As we make our way back to the Union Hotel, Amir recalls the assassination of each member of the Killer7 before he meets a young Harmon Smith who assassinates the Harmon and Kung playing the game of chess. The Forbidden Room might only have been accessible through Amir. Finally, on the top of the building, Amir confronts what he's done. He shoots his younger self in the third eye. He's come to terms with that part of himself. In the final mission, Lion, Amir is Garcian no longer, and one of the consequences of that is that he can no longer see the Heaven Smile. Let's discuss my theory about whether or not the game is taking place inside Amir's head. The Smith Syndicate is the only group that can see and take down the Heaven Smile. This is thanks to Amir's powers, and it's not until the US government develops the Handsome Men that they have any alternative to relying on the Smith Syndicate. The Syndicate, who might ultimately be under control by the Japanese because of Amir's repressed education. The world of Killer7 has a theme of death and rebirth, or at least death not being the end. Most of the characters the Smith Syndicate kill appear in later levels as remnant psyches. Dan Smith had already been killed by Curtis Blackburn when Amir took his life in the Union Hotel, and it is suggested that Amir has lived more than once. He certainly looks well for a man born in 1942. Returning to the game of chess, and a question I asked earlier, whose piece in the game is Amir? It might sound obvious to say Amir is Harmon's piece, as Harmon is the leader of the Killer7, but this is only because Amir wills it. When Amir interrupts their game, Harmon is terrified of him while Kung is maniacally laughing. This is a different Harmon from the one leading the Killer7, a Harmon that remembers Amir murdering him. So is Amir Kunlun's piece? Amir was trained by the Japanese, but he has also been warring with the Heaven Smile as he is the only person capable of seeing them. I think that Kun wants to stop Amir from realizing who he is, and that is why more Heaven Smile appear the closer we get to the end of the game. The Union Hotel is infested with them. Of course, by this point, the Heaven Smile created by Kun have gotten away from him. The US government's creations and the offspring of the duplicators are the majority of what is fought. Was this part of Kun's game plan? In the end, Amir, as the player, makes the choice which nation wins the game, and by this point, Harmon and Kun are no longer alive to witness its conclusion. Not that it matters. As Kun says in Shanghai, the world doesn't change, all it does is turn. Thanks for watching. In the end, Killer7 presents a nihilistic view of human nature and the conflict between nations. How those that kill desire death themselves, or at least the death of their past in order for them to move on with their lives. In the Union Hotel, the soul shells, the collectibles needed to pass through the Vinculum Gate, are located where Amir executed the Killer7. This leads me to believe that the soul shells in the other missions represent previous assassinations of Amir, as himself or through the Smith Syndicate. That he has to revisit the past and come to terms with his actions before being allowed to move forward. What do you think? So much of the game is open to interpretation, and that's why I think it's such a worthwhile work of art. I'd love to hear your interpretations in the comments, or your queries as to how certain characters or elements fit into the grand scheme of things. As always, if you'd like to help the channel and show me some love, please like the video, share it on your favorite social media sites, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, in the name of Harmon, I hope you're all having a wonderful day.